Please don't skip ahead yet. Hi, this is your friendly neighborhood 80 slasher librarian, Josh LaRue. Just need a moment of your time. A lot of people don't know, but we're not able to monetize the channel here on YouTube due to the fact that the copyright holders of the books I narrate, the movies we rip, they get the ad revenue, and also being a partner on YouTube involves a lot of rules and censorship, and to do so would make it where a lot of the content, the audiobooks, the riffs, would have to be heavily censored or deleted completely. So we depend on amazing slashaholics like you to help fund the channel and keep it going and growing for years to come. And there's several fun ways to do that. You could join our Patreon right up there. And as a patron, you can join for as low as like $2, $5, $10 a month, on up as high as you want, and enjoy a lot of cool gifts like free ebooks, early access, exclusive content, even voicing characters and audiobooks here on the channel. You could also go to our PayPal and use the QR code right there, and you can donate directly to the channel. We see all donations and we appreciate all of them. If you don't want to use the QR code or don't know how, you can use our PayPal email address, which will be in the description below and the pinned comment, as well as our Cash App donation username. And a fun way to help the channel is through our Cameo, right down there. On Cameo, you can ask for a birthday video, anniversary video. You can ask us to sing a song or something, or ask us questions, and you can get a video from me, Alex, Sean, Master Evil, Mother Evil, the Rodeo Clown, any character from any show on the channel, or any character that I've voiced in the audiobooks. It's a fun way to help the channel. It's only $10 a video, and we'll have a lot of fun doing that. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's content. Be excellent to each other. Please consider helping the channel. And always remember, the sun never sets on those who ride into it. Thank you. Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. The fan novelization by Landon Turner. Chapter 8. Robin and David. David and Robin. As Robin basked in the upstairs bedroom, she pictured what the two of them would look like together as a couple. She could see him walking across campus holding hands, maybe going for a stroll, going for a midnight swim in the lake behind the dormitories, maybe go to a football game together. She liked what she saw in her mind, for the most part, but something truthfully didn't sit right with her, and she couldn't use his terrific body to make excuses for it any longer. Was it the fact he was a stoner? Robin wasn't at all like Maddie. She enjoyed getting high every now and again, but she couldn't see herself being with someone who let it consume their life. It had happened to her brother. It's what happens when sheltered kids get out into the real world. It can be too much to bear, and sometimes they get swallowed whole and go to the opposite end of the spectrum and let their wild side consume their life. Robin knew better. Despite her ditzy demeanor, Robin had a good head on her shoulders. Her brother had left their sheltered and closeted community and household, and found it all too much. Now he smoked pot every day and didn't have a job or any plans for his future. Robin knew better than that. Robin had a future. Then again, she hadn't used a condom with David, which hadn't been the brightest idea. But if she got pregnant, she'd just have an abortion. There was no way she was becoming a mother during college. She had a future, after all. Having a kid too young can change your entire trajectory. It had happened with her parents. They had gotten married at 18 and squeezed out as many kids as possible. And now their lives had been totally altered. Robin could not see herself ending up like them. She should have said something about a condom before David had taken her upstairs, but some guys could get super irritated at the notion of wearing protection. So she hadn't said anything. But as she lay there in the afterglow of sex, she regretted it. Did she even have enough for an abortion? Abortion wasn't such an easy thing to accomplish. Robin hated how some women could be so flippant about such a serious topic. It was a big decision in Robin's mind. Sometimes a necessary one, but a big one nonetheless. Besides, she couldn't exactly see David being the type to stick around after this party, much less staying to help support her and the baby. She couldn't at all see him being a supportive father if all he wanted to do was get stoned. Maybe he was different, though. Maybe this party had been an escape for him as well, and on the outside, in the real world, He was a good guy. It had been a good one-night stand, whichever way you looked at it, in any case. Robin did have a good time, and that had been her intention coming out to Crystal Lake. If only Maddie hadn't wimped out, she thought as she curled up underneath the sheets and toyed with the flashlight in her hand. Maddie could have been a supportive girlfriend, but instead chose to be uptight about every little thing. Robin needed friends who were ride or die. She wanted someone who would be by her side no matter what and never against her. Maybe Robin needed to rethink living with Maddie. After all, they were totally incompatible, and this weekend proved it. She should have known better, that putting up a roommate ad on a bulletin board on campus would open her up to having to live with total freaks. But Maddie had never been uptight until now. Then again, they had really never been to a serious college party, with drugs, that is. Maddie was fine with drinking, but apparently had a hang-up about pot. And then she gets dressed in Melissa's stuff and waltzes out to the shed to, what, steal David away? Please, Maddie, Robin thought. Why couldn't Maddie see that David hadn't been interested in her? Maybe Maddie had been sheltered herself and was clueless when it came to advances from other men. David had been looking at me, Robin thought, not you. Maddie hadn't been able to take the hint, and when Robin was kind of a bitch about it, Robin knew that she had been super blunt back in the kitchen earlier today, but Maddie deserved it. Robin had made it clear that she liked David, and he couldn't have had both. Or maybe he could have had both, but Robin had never been in a threesome before, and she didn't see Maddie being okay with it. She had looked so ridiculous in those gaudy diamond earrings and all of that extravagant makeup. Is that what Maddie thought men wanted? Robin thought. Designer clothes? Robin laughed to herself. It was also Melissa's problem, and why she was having so much trouble getting Nick's attention. Robin could tell that Nick cared about more than designer clothes. You had to have personality, and unfortunately, Maddie has as much personality as a wooden post, and Melissa was nothing but evil personified. Guys really want personality, Robin thought. At least most do. Having a good body is nice and all, because Melissa was definitely attractive. But at the end of the day, if you didn't have a good personality, guys would never go for it. Unless they're desperate. There was no room for desperate at this party, except maybe an Eddie. There were plenty of people to fool around with, and yet Melissa and Maddie both still hadn't gotten laid. And the reason had to be their personalities. Maddie just needed to lighten up and have a good time, and Melissa needed a Xanax or 3. The way she had bullied that poor girl from next door broke Robin's heart. Speaking of which, what had happened to Nick and Tina? Better yet, what had happened to David? She shone the flashlight towards the open bedroom door. She didn't hear a sound, except for the shower running in the next room. Robin sighed and reached off the bed for her discarded shirt and put it on, picking up the flashlight and walking to the door. She peered out into the darkened hallway, shining the flashlight. "Maddie?" she called. No response. All was quiet except for the shower and her own soft breathing. She shivered as her bare feet touched the hardwood floor. "David?" she said. Again there was no answer. Then she could hear movement, shuffling, someone rummaging perhaps. Robin shined the flashlight down the hallway to a door at the end of the hall and held her breath. The darkness was unnerving her with every second that went by. What the fuck had happened to the lights? "Maddie? David?" Frustrated that nobody was answering her, she scoffed and tried a door. It was locked. She knocked. "Russell? Sandra? Anyone?" The house was seemingly deserted. She tried another door. Locked. She reached the end of the hallway and pushed the door open. It was pitch black inside. She aimed the flashlight around the interior of the room. It looked like what appeared to be a master bedroom. It was Russell's aunt and uncle's room. Old dusty knickknacks and trinkets adorned the room. There was a wooden jewelry box on one dresser. The bed was huge, with long mahogany bedposts that spiraled up to the ceiling. Robin sauntered over to the dresser and rummaged through the jewelry box, taking out several pieces that rivaled Melissa's collection. And then there was a soft crash coming from the closet, and Robin jerked the flashlight towards the noise. "David?" she said. There was no answer. The closet door squeaked on its hinges, as if it had been brushed by the finest bit of movement. Robin froze, swallowing. Something was definitely in there, hiding in the darkness. She aimed the unsteady beam of the flashlight at the closet and inched towards it. Thunder crackled outside, lightning flashed. Robin jumped. "David, are you in there?" Silence. She opened the closet door, and suddenly, from the top of a stack of aged boxes, came a gray tabby cat. Its hair stood up on its back, and it hissed at Robin, who lurched backwards with fright. She relaxed when she saw just who had been rustling around in the closet. "Kitty, oh, come here, Kitty." Robin reached down and picked up the cat, petting it as it meowed. "Whose kitty are you? You're not David's kitty. I don't think he has one," Robin cooed playfully. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the cat took off down the hallway. It seemed like it had been afraid, but of what? As thunder shook the cabin once more, Robin gazed out the window, looking out at the lonely property. Where the hell was everyone? Michael and his girlfriend were still nowhere to be seen or heard from. Shouldn't they have received a telephone call by now? Where was David or Maddie? Still at the shed? No, something didn't feel right. Robin felt a knot forming deep in her core. But it was about to storm, and there was no way she was going out there in the darkness where it wasn't safe. Maybe they were all out looking for Jane and Michael. Robin looked for the cars. She could still see Ben's van sitting there underneath a tree, and Nick's Jeep was also nearby. It looked like nobody had just taken off and left. So where were they? Robin frowned and then went back into the hallway. The shower was still running. The rest of the house was dead quiet. The hallway was dark. Robin shone the flashlight to light her way and inched back towards her room, went inside and shut the door. Surely they were all safe, Robin thought. Maybe they were all taking a midnight swim down by the lake. But she didn't hear any laughter. Then again, it was hard to hear anything over the wind and the tiny dry storm ensuing outside. She peered down through the window again. There was nobody outside. All she heard was the wind howling and rattling the shutters outside the window. Suddenly she heard a new sound, footsteps outside the door. Robin crawled back into bed. "So, what'd you bring me?" she called. The footsteps stopped in front of the door, but the door didn't open. There was still silence. Whoever it was on the other side of the door wasn't uttering a sound. "Well, come on. Do you have food in your mouth?" Robin said. Still more silence. Then the door started to slowly creak open. "All right, Mr. Caveman," Robin teased. "Stop right there." She pointed the flashlight at the door as it opened. Robin's smile faded immediately. Her flashlight landed on David's face, but something was horribly wrong. His mouth hung open, and blood dripped from his mouth. Then her jaw opened even wider as she saw that his head wasn't attached to his body. Bloody tendrils dangled down and dripped crimson onto the floor. It was just his head. She raised the flashlight and it landed on a hockey mask. The man in the mask stepped into the room. A nauseating odor was unmistakably present. He was covered in detritus. Bits of flesh were exposed through his tattered work suit, and bone poked through. Robin screamed and scrabbled backwards across the bed as Jason tossed the decapitated head of David at her. She slammed back against the window at the head of the bed, her hands flailing wildly for a weapon or something to break the window with. Jason advanced towards her with no urgency. He slowly stalked. Robin was in complete shock. The nightmarish huge man leered at her, and Robin shrieked "No!" again. The machete in the man's hand lifted and swung down. It bisected her, slashing into her abdomen and deep into her belly. Jason sawed at her maniacally, his eyes widening with lust as he saw the blood that poured out. Robin felt everything. She felt every inch of the blade sawing through her midsection, and she threw her head to the sky and let out an agonizing scream. Then his bloody wet fingers grabbed her by the throat and she let out a hideous gagging sound as his thumbs clamped around her larynx, crushing her trachea. Jason lifted her effortlessly and hurled her back through the cabin window, shattering it. Robin plummeted down and landed with a sickening thud. Jason took a breath and stared down through the broken glass. Robin was dead on impact. The party house returned to a deathly still silence, despite the faint sound of running water. Eddie often contemplated life in the shower. It was where he could truly be alone with his thoughts, and now was a time that he desperately needed it. The lights had gone out a few minutes ago, and he wasn't going to let it stop him from his much-needed me time. As the hot water rushed down his body, he felt as all his worries were melting away. He also had just pleasured himself and was experiencing a lot of clarity for the first time all weekend long. What am I even doing here, he thought. A bunch of rich, uppity college kids? This isn't my scene. No wonder he wasn't getting lucky. He didn't have anything in common with anyone here. He had never gotten along with the ones who went to college and pursued higher education. Eddie was a townie to them, part of the real world. And Eddie felt like he couldn't catch a break because of it. Eddie had tried higher education, but quickly discovered that it wasn't for him. It was no wonder he didn't fit in at a college party. He could see it in the way they looked at him, and gave him snobby glances out of the corner of their eyes. The clarity was completely washing over him after he had had some help from his own hand, and he could see it plain as day. He had made an ass of himself. That much was true. He had completely fooled himself into thinking Melissa, a snobby socialite, would want anything to do with him, a scrawny geek. And to think he had gone through all this trouble only for Michael, the only reason he had come along, to not even show up. Where were they? He wondered as he turned off the hot water. He stood for a second, taking in the steam, and leaning against the shower wall. He listened. The house was silent. Maybe they had all gone to the lake for a skinny dip without him. It was probably for the best. He'd probably just embarrass himself even further. He couldn't believe he actually had trusted Melissa. He should have known that she was just leading him on to be a part of some sick, twisted plot. Things like this tended to happen to Eddie a lot. He tended to see the best in people, only to be sorely let down in the end. His last girlfriend had been loyal, up until a certain point. Eddie had really fallen in love with her. After all, he could actually have a conversation about movies and sci-fi with her, without her having to feign interest. She was legitimately passionate about what he was passionate about, and it made him think they were a match made in heaven. But then she started growing distant, and before he knew it, rumors were flying that she was seen making out with the manager of the comic book store where she worked. Eddie had been fooled again, by another woman who just wanted to use him. This time, at least he could blame it on the alcohol. But then he had been sober, and still had been dragged along. What is it with women, he thought to himself. They say they want someone nice and respectful, someone to hold the door for them and pull out their chair, and Eddie would do everything right. That's what really killed him. He had done everything right. And then they'd turn on you, and suddenly all the small things wouldn't be good enough anymore. And then they run to the next best thing. They run to the nearest guy who can fill their needs. They didn't seem to have an ounce of loyalty in them at all. Robin sure as hell didn't seem loyal to anyone. Melissa wouldn't know loyalty if it hit her in the face. Sandra seemed to be loyal to Russell, but then again, he didn't really know them all that well. Just breathe, my man, he thought. Fuck Melissa. She's just one chick. This night has no implications about the future. He could see it now. On a big movie set, as a consultant for the next Star Trek picture, or maybe a future installment of Alien or Star Wars. He had thought many times about making a career for himself as a writer, and he already had several novel outlines written. If only he had the discipline to sit and hammer out all of his messy ideas, he might be able to get somewhere. If his personality and interests couldn't attract women, surely his money could. But it still wasn't enough motivation. He needed something else. Something that would light a fire under his ass. Maybe tonight was that something. Maybe tonight he could finally realize that his future was bigger and brighter than this one sour night in his history. Maybe when he got home, he could sit down and start planning out his destiny. Finally take some of his ideas and put them on paper. Then he could get some kind of publishing deal and make royalties, and he'd be set for at least a decade. One thing he wasn't looking forward to were the rabid fans of whatever franchise he would be writing for. His fans. It stressed him out more than he was comfortable admitting. Wouldn't it be difficult to always have a group of people expecting something from you? He didn't know if he could live like that, always having something expected of you. But it surely was rewarding, and the benefits would outweigh all of that. After all, he felt fortunate enough to have a talent such as writing. If only he could harness it. All he had were a few sloppy outlines scrawled out on notebook paper. What he had to do next was find the right audience and write the right thing at the right time. That was the challenging part. What to write? He had so many different ideas running through his mind that it was hard to consolidate them into one combined concept. First, he had the idea of an entire galaxy populated by highly evolved single-celled organisms. They could walk and talk and had developed large, vast colonizations on other planets. One man and his sensual female partner, yes, it was coming together in his head. It was up to them to save the galaxy from poachers coming after the highly evolved protozoa. Yes, he could see it all. The effects, the musical score, composed by none other than John Williams, of course. His dramatic score would perfectly accentuate such a film. Maybe he could take a screenwriting class at the film college, and then he could really learn what it takes to write a good script. Eddie felt like this world was so full of opportunities that this one weekend felt like a tiny blip on his horizon. It was just a small setback. Sure, he had made a fool of himself, but he would likely never see anyone that had come out to Crystal Lake ever again, and frankly, he didn't even want to see them again. Mighty might have been the only one he was interested in getting to know, but as far as he was concerned, everyone else was an uppity twat. He should have known coming out to a luxurious cabin owned by someone's rich uncle was not a good idea. Eddie didn't fit in with these types of people. People with class, that is. Eddie's idea of class was takeout at McDonald's, or maybe a date night to see the newest horror or sci-fi movie, and then to the comic book store. Did he really see himself ending up with someone like Melissa, who likely needed tons of designer clothes and jewelry to keep her happy? What had he been thinking? He hadn't been thinking at all, with his head, that is. He had been completely consumed and enamored by Melissa, so much so that he was blinded by her dazzling light. Now he realized that her light was all for show. There was nothing shining from within. It was all designer clothes and makeup. That was what most girls that dated Eddie seemed to be. Nothing but show. They would come into his life and make him fall head over heels, only to turn the tables and make him wish he had never met them. Eddie, however, had a future, and he wasn't going to let failed relationships or this horrible weekend out at Crystal Lake stop him from seeing it through. He pulled aside the shower curtains, got out, and dried off, fumbling in the dark, still listening for any sounds of party-goers, but there was still no sound now except for the dry storm brewing outside. Eddie threw on his undershirt and boxers and walked out into the hallway. As he strolled, he thought, what the hell happened to the lights? It must have been the storm. He went down into the living room. All was quiet. In a dump by the couch were all of Mike's presents for his surprise birthday party. Eddie scoffed. Some party, he muttered under his breath. He sat down on the couch and started rifling through the gifts. I might as well go ahead and open them if Michael isn't going to show. He read one of the tags on his shiny blue compact gift. Happy birthday, Michael. You lucky son of a bitch. Many happy returns. Love, Melissa. Eddie rolled his eyes and shook the gift. It sounded like nothing on the inside. He tossed it aside. Cunt, he grumbled. He snatched up a huge red package, wrapped in tissue paper, and opened it. Personal penis enlarger, he read. It was the lettering on the box under the wrapping paper. Then he opened the box. Inside was a magnifying glass. Next, Eddie heard something behind him, coming down the stairs. Heavy thuds. A hulking shadow fell over him. So, you change your mind or what, Melissa? Eddie craned his neck to see over his shoulder, and he gasped as he saw the frightening man that loomed over him. Deranged, sunken eyes squinted at him through the eye holes of a weathered hockey mask. Eddie opened his mouth to scream, but the machete in the towering figure's right hand moved fast like a cobra. It swung down, coming down hard on Eddie's Adam's apple, slicing through his trachea. Eddie's panicked scream never made it out. The howling of the dry storm had simmered down now to a low hum. The wind still whipped across the clearing, scattering the dead leaves and giving them a life of their own. Dark clouds were still hanging low over the lake. Tina and Nick eventually found peace and quiet after Tina had almost brought the house down. They both made their way down the stairs slowly as Nick held Tina tightly, consoling her and trying to calm her down. Are you all right? Nick's question was answered by Tina squeezing Nick's hand lightly and nodding. Her body was still quaking mildly, but everything seemed to have calmed down. The house was no longer rattling on its foundation. You sure? Nick asked. Tina nodded, sniffling and wiping away tears. All right, Tina, if this Jason guy is really out there, I want to get everybody together so we can get the hell out of here, Nick said, facing her and holding her by both of her arms. Tina wasn't listening. Her eyes flickered to the window as she looked out into the dark night. What, Tina? What is it? Said Nick. Her eyes were emanating sheer terror. She's in the woods, Nick, Tina said. Her gaze was riveted to the door. Who? My mother. I know where she is, Tina cried. She started to move for the door, but Nick held her in place, shaking his head frantically. All right. We'll find her, Tina. We'll find her. But let's get everybody so we can leave together. Tina shook her head, her eyes madly blinking away hot tears that rushed to the surface, still picturing that scythe exploding out of her mother's chest. No, I have to find her, Tina exclaimed, wriggling in Nick's grasp. Tina! Nick bellowed. He stared at her hard, firmly holding her in place. Can we please get everyone together first? Nick begged. I can't go with you. What if my mother comes back and I'm not here? I don't want to leave you alone, protested Nick. I'll be fine. You go get everyone. I'll wait right here, Tina said, and sat on the couch. She dried her tears, sniffled, and then curled up on the couch. Nick stared at her trustingly. Don't move. Then he went out the front door, leaving Tina there in the living room. She waited a few moments, hearing Nick's footsteps receding away from the house. That was her cue. Her mother was out there, and it was up to her to prevent the loss of another of her caregivers. With that thought, she ran, snuck out the back door, and disappeared into the woods. Nick sprinted across the clearing towards the rental cabin, as the wind whipped the trees around him and as thunder growled over his head. He scrambled up onto the porch of the cabin and threw open the door. The house was almost pitch black dark and eerily quiet. Now, with the knowledge that there really was a vicious killer on the loose, his entire body seized up and the hair on his neck stood erect. His hand instinctively went for Tina's father's pistol on his belt, and he fingered the trigger, moving cautiously through the darkened cabin. "David!" he called into the house urgently. There was no response. The once boisterous party house was dead silent, and Nick felt a searing, pulsating knot in his stomach, telling him something was insanely wrong. "Maddie?" Again, no answer. He ran up the stairs, booking up two at a time, getting to the top floor and looking around. The hallway and the rooms were seemingly dark and empty. Nobody responded to his loud calls. Nick went back downstairs and scanned the living room again, searching for any sign of life in the darkness. "Maddie! David! Melissa! Anybody?" The house echoed in resonating silence. Nick started to move for the door, but stopped when he saw something glimmer in the light, under the coffee table. Nick bent down to his knees and gasped. The moonlight filtering in through the window was just enough for Nick to be able to see the glassy eye of Eddie Hassel. His head almost severed from his neck, his mouth open in a frozen scream that had never surfaced. Nick didn't scream. His jaw locked, and then he got to his feet and bolted for the door. His hands found the pistol, and he drew it as he clambered out onto the porch and leaned against the door, collecting himself. He then ran towards his Jeep sitting in the yard. Fuck this, he thought. Everyone was dead. They had to be. Mike, God, not my cousin, he thought. And now Eddie? Both slaughtered. As Nick approached his Jeep, he stopped dead in his tracks and his stomach sunk into his feet. All four of his tires had been slashed to ribbons. They were trapped out at Crystal Lake. "Tina! Tina!" Amanda Shepherd's weary and hysterical voice pierced the night. It felt like she and Dr. Cruz had been running through the dark woods for eons, and still there was no sign of Tina anywhere. Mrs. Shepherd's panicked mind could only focus on one sole objective, finding her daughter. All else was secondary. "Mrs. Shepherd!" bellowed Dr. Cruz. He panted as he struggled to keep up with her. She was running through the woods in a frenzied panic. "Oh God, Tina, answer me! Where are you?" Amanda screeched. Dr. Cruz finally caught up to the hysterical woman and held her in place. "Look at me!" he shouted. "You are wasting time. She's probably back at the house by now. Mrs. Shepherd wriggled in his grasp, her eyes flickering madly all around her. "You saw the car!" she screamed. "Tina!" "Let's just call the police," Dr. Cruz suggested, firmly holding her. "She's out here!" Mrs. Shepherd cried. It was no use. The woman was absolutely inconsolable. He had never seen anything like it. Here they were, out in the middle of the woods with the killer, and Mrs. Shepherd wouldn't stop screaming. "We are wasting time. Don't you understand that? I've got something to—" Dr. Cruz's voice was interrupted by the sharp sound of a branch snapping. They were not alone. Mrs. Shepherd didn't seem to hear it, but Cruz did. Dr. Cruz's face morphed into an expression of terror. "What's the matter with you?" Amanda cried. "Shh!" Dr. Cruz shushed her. They both listened. "What is it? What else aren't you telling me?" Amanda implored. Dr. Cruz backed away from her. He was tired of her. "I'm getting out of here," he said, wagging a finger at her. "You can find your own way back." Amanda sneered at him and snatched the keys to his Buick out of his hand. Her lips curled with seething anger. "You're not just a lousy doctor, you're a fucking coward." "Give me the key," Dr. Cruz ordered. His eyes narrowed at her. Crack! A rustle in the thicket behind them. Dr. Cruz's gaze was directed towards a clump of trees behind Mrs. Shepherd. His jaw opened, and he pointed a trembling finger at just who was stepping out from behind that thicket. The long, wooden handle of a curved spear was held firmly in his hands. It was Jason Voorhees. Dr. Cruz couldn't believe his eyes. He was huge, at least 7 foot tall, covered in detritus and algae. His skeleton was exposed, bits of bone poked through where his flesh had rolled away. Mrs. Shepherd went weak at the knees. "Oh my God!" she shrieked. Jason advanced towards them, not lunging or lurching, just calmly lumbering towards them without showing an ounce of emotion. Dr. Cruz was the first to run. He bolted through the thicket, leaving Amanda there in the clearing with the maniacal beast that towered some 3 feet above her. Then adrenaline flooded her veins, and just like that, she was off like a rocket through the trees, her feeble, middle-aged body moving as fast and as nimble as it possibly could manage. Neither of them dared look back. They scrambled down a wooden hillside as Jason closed in the gap. No matter how fast they ran, Jason was always right there, hot on their trail. The spear glistened in the moonlight. Dr. Cruz ran into another clearing and lost his footing, sliding down into the dead leaves. Amanda had too much momentum and came careening into the clearing, almost coming down on top of him. Dr. Cruz grabbed Amanda and looked into her eyes, pulling her onto the ground. "Listen to me," Dr. Cruz said, almost out of breath. "Tina knew. She tried to warn us." He suddenly froze. Jason was at the edge of the clearing, behind Mrs. Shepherd. Jason raised the spear, closing in on a double kill. Dr. Cruz suddenly went into action, grabbing Amanda firmly and yanking her up to her feet. "Run!" he shouted. But there was no time. The spear came right for them, right at Dr. Cruz's midsection. He snatched Amanda hard, holding her up in front of him and using her as a shield as it plunged into her back. "Wait! What are you doing? No! No!" Amanda Shepherd threw her head to the sky and howled in agony. The blade propelled out through her chest in a spray of crimson rain. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Chapter 8 of Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood by Landon Turner. Cannot believe that there's only one upload left. That's right, the next upload I put out of this book after tonight will be Chapter 9, 10, and the epilogue. It's gonna be a great conclusion. I can already tell. I have not read it yet. Like I said, any chance I get to read these books for the first time as I narrate them, I take it. That way I'm enjoying them with you as we both hear them, read them, whatever, if you're reading along as you listen. This was a great chapter. A lot of stuff went down in this chapter. Robin and Eddie are no longer with us. Rest in peace. Nick and Tina, their whole situation has calmed down. Tina playing the little manipulator, lying and stuff, trying to get him to go do his thing so she can do hers. I gotta hand it to her, though. At least she didn't sit there and keep arguing and screaming at him and stuff. She knew he wasn't going to listen. So she just played along until he left, and then she went out to do her thing to rescue her mom. I really hate that Maddie and Eddie got such brutal deaths in this movie and book. Poor Eddie, he's just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Him and Robin both focusing so much and thinking so much that they have a future, when their future was less than a few more minutes. But yeah, one of the most vicious Jasons ever. Kane Hodder in his debut as Jason in the movie New Blood. The best look ever for Jason, in my opinion, and I love that Landon makes sure to bring that out in his writing, to explain just how gruesome and grimy and everything that Jason actually looks, and to express how much that would stink. Because just looking at that Jason, he would stink so bad. So yeah, Robin's death was great, very intense. He kept, even with the cat jumping out, one of the biggest tropes ever in horror movies, Landon really stretched that tension out and put us in the scene, even those of us who knew where it was going. Eddie down there, opening the presents. Great move, Eddie. Fuck everybody else. They're all twats, just like he said. But yeah, I got to finish up talking about this chapter with the elephant in the room. Mrs. Shepherd and Dr. fucking Cruz out in the woods, running from Jason. Dr. Cruz is such a fucking coward, holding Mrs. Shepherd and putting her in front of Jason's blade. Either way, great chapter. Great conclusion to the chapter with Mrs. Shepherd's death. Again, I wish they hadn't killed her. It would have been nice for her, for Dr. Cruz to try to use her as a shield in the movie, and she gets out of the way and he gets it. But the parents never make it. I mean, look at part 4. We didn't even know how that mom died. But yeah, really enjoying the book. Looking forward to the conclusion in the next upload. Hope you are as well. Let me and Landon know what you think of the book so far in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe as well. Click the bell so you always know when new chapters are dropping. And please consider supporting the channel. We cannot make a dime off of ad revenue. So the only way to keep this channel going, I can't stress it enough, is through Patreon, PayPal donations, Cash App donations, or Cameo videos. All the information to help the channel financially is in the description below. We can't do it without you. Please consider it. And until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80/your librarian saying, thanks for listening, be excellent to each other, and remember, the sun never sets on those who ride into it. I don't know what that meaning means to you. I do know what it means to me. If you go to the community tab of the channel, someone actually asked me what that saying means to me, and I explained it, and my answer is there on the community tab, one of the top posts that's there right now if you're curious. And the saying has really helped me a lot, and hope it helps you too. We'll see you soon.